the blue Mediterranean sky suddenly turns leaden gray, signaling a catastrophic doomsday event approaching the coast rapidly. A gigantic wall of water rises vertically in the ocean, completely obscuring the sunlight with its immense height. The deadly wave travels at the speed of a jet, ready to crush everything in its path. In Venice, romantic canals turn into deadly waterfalls, swallowing tiny gondola boats in a terrifying instant of destruction. The famous San Marcos Square is crushed under the weight of millions of tons of dark sea water. In Barcelona, sirens wail too late as panicked crowds flee hopelessly from the approaching wall of water. The centuries-old Sagrada Familia structure suddenly shakes violently before collapsing into the rushing floodwaters below it. The sound of shattering metal mixes with cracking concrete to create a terrifying symphony of total destruction. There is nowhere to hide as the water level rises rapidly, swallowing even the tallest skyscrapers completely. The paradise beaches of Ibiza are wiped out in an instant, leaving only desolation and death behind. The glorious ancient ruins of Great Rome are now just a painful memory buried under mud and water. This is not science fiction. This is the most devastating wrath that Mother Nature has ever unleashed. Human complacency has paid the price with the collapse of the oldest civilizations on the European continent. The Mediterranean is no longer a cradle of culture. It has become a giant, cold, watery grave. Two nations, Italy and Spain, are buried under deep water, erasing all traces of life on the surface. Desperate screams are drowned out by the ceaseless roaring of the hungry ocean devouring the land. Millions of fragments of daily life float aimlessly on the murky water surface, creating a haunting scene. Darkness covers all of Europe as the power grid collapses, pushing humanity back to the Stone Age. The desolate scene that appears after the disaster makes anyone who sees it shudder with pure fear. Witness the worst doomsday scenario in history as a mega-tsunami strikes the Mediterranean Sea with full force. The summer sun shines brightly on the beautiful Sicily coast, where thousands of tourists are enjoying their vacation. In the distance, Mount Etna stands majestic and tall, releasing thin wisps of white smoke into the sky. No one knows that deep underground massive geological pressures are silently accumulating with every passing second right now. Seismographs at the monitoring center begin to record abnormal needle fluctuations continuously on the paper charts and screens. A flock of seagulls flying overhead suddenly panics, screaming shrilly and scattering in all directions without any direction. On the ground, stray dogs begin barking loudly, tucking their tails and running away as if seeing monsters. The sea surface near the shore begins to vibrate, creating tiny ripples spreading out everywhere across the water. Suddenly, a massive explosion like a nuclear bomb rings out from the mountain, tearing apart the peaceful atmosphere. The southeastern flank of Mount Etna cannot withstand the pressure, beginning to crack into gigantic fissures and gaps. Billions of tons of rock and cooled lava begin sliding down with rapidly increasing speed due to gravity. This massive volume of material crashes straight into the Ionian Sea like a high-speed runaway train losing brakes. The impact creates a column of water hundreds of meters high, shooting into the sky, obscuring the sun. The sea surface is compressed deeply, forming a giant crater of water before rebounding back with extreme force. The energy from the impact transforms into shockwaves, propagating underwater at terrible speed across the vast ocean floor. The atmospheric pressure shockwave shatters the glass windows of the houses located closest to the coastline instantly. At a nearby fishing port, fishermen watch in horror as the seawater suddenly recedes far into distance. The docked ships are stranded, lying tilted on the muddy seabed filled with trash and green seaweed. This receding water phenomenon is a deadly sign, signaling that a massive wave is preparing to strike soon. On the beach, a terrifying silence hangs before panic-stricken screams begin to echo throughout the crowded area. Disaster sirens begin to wail intermittently, but the sound seems too small compared to nature's immense power. A thin white line appears on the horizon, gradually growing into a massive wall of white foam rapidly. Beachgoers abandon everything, trying to run as fast as possible towards the mainland to find high ground. However, human speed cannot compare at all with the incredible moving speed of this massive tsunami wave. The sky darkens as the shadow of the giant wave blocks the sunlight, covering the entire coastline completely. The first wave crashes ashore with the power of thousands of bombs, crushing every obstacle in its path. Coastal coconut trees are snapped like toothpicks, swept away into the swirling, murky water current instantly. Seawater floods into the streets, turning asphalt roads into fast-flowing rivers, sweeping away cars and vehicles. A passenger bus tries to turn around but is lifted by the current and thrown into a building. The flooded electrical system explodes, creating blue electrical sparks flashing brightly within the curtain of dark water. In Rome, scientists stare at their computer screens with pale faces, unable to believe the data they see. Emergency evacuation notices are broadcast nationwide, but there is simply no time left to save everyone now. The wave continues moving offshore, heading straight towards the major cities of Italy and Spain with speed. At sea, giant cruise ships suddenly find themselves lifted high up the steep slope of the rising wave. Passengers on board scream as furniture slides and crashes around in the tilting cabins of the cruise ship. The tsunami does not lose energy, but gets stronger as it moves into shallower waters near the coast. In Naples, residents see the sea level rising rapidly, overflowing the breakwater walls in just a few seconds. Speedboats in the harbor break their moorings, drifting freely and crashing into each other, shattering into pieces. Water begins to penetrate the basements of coastal buildings, trapping those seeking shelter inside the lower levels. Police and rescue forces watch helplessly as the water swallows the city, unable to do anything to stop it. In Venice, the tide rises to record levels. The Meuse barrier system is completely useless against this power. St. Mark's Square begins to flood. Tourists wade through water before realizing the level is rising too fast. Historic cafes by the square have tables swept away. A grand piano floats aimlessly on the floodwater. In Spain, although further away, signs of violent rough seas are also beginning to appear on the coast. People in Barcelona gather at the beach to watch the strange phenomenon, unaware that death is approaching fast. The tsunami travels across the Mediterranean at 800 kilometers per hour, devastating every small island in its path without mercy. All communication efforts between nations become chaotic as undersea cables are severed by the landslide and currents. Europe is facing the greatest natural disaster in modern history without any preparation for such a catastrophe. Birds flying in the sky are the only creatures that can see the full panorama of the destruction. The fateful moment has arrived, nature has struck, and humans can only wait for their destiny now. And now, the true nightmare is just beginning as the wall of water finally makes contact with land. In Venice, a massive wall of water strikes, turning the heritage city into rubble under the deep sea. Narrow canals suddenly become water cannons, spraying with extreme pressure, destroying everything standing in their narrow path instantly. The famous Rialto Bridge buckles under pressure before snapping in half and sinking into the raging floodwaters. The centuries-old street Marx Campanile is struck by waves, collapsing onto the flooded square in a massive ruin. Golden angel statues on the tower top fall down, disappearing forever into the dark and murky water below. Venice, the jewel of Italy, is officially wiped off the world map in just a few short minutes. Meanwhile, in Naples, the true nightmare begins as the tsunami strikes the seaport directly with full force now. A giant cruise ship weighing tens of thousands of tons is lifted up by the wave like a toy. The ship drifts inland, crushing coastal apartment buildings under its massive hull with terrifying and unstoppable momentum. Ear-splitting metal collision sounds echo as the ship gets stuck between two collapsing skyscrapers in the city center. Castel dell'Ovo, the symbol of Naples, is smashed into small drifting stone fragments by the powerful wave impact. Seawater floods the Maradona Stadium, turning the green grass into a reservoir of sewage and floating debris instantly. The narrow, steep streets of Naples turn into deadly flood waterfalls, sweeping away all life in their path. Residents climb onto rooftops waving for help in despair as the water level rises too fast to escape. The modern subway system becomes giant water pipes, drowning the city from below with uncontrollable force and speed. Dark, murky water carrying car wreckage and trees rushes forward with terrible destructive speed and immense kinetic energy. In the Aegean Sea area near Rome, the tsunami meets no obstacles, advancing inland for tens of kilometers. Ancient Roman archaeological ruins located along the coast are washed away by the current without a single trace. Fiumicino International Airport is submerged in a sea of water, hundreds of planes soaking in the salty current. A taking-off plane is forced to emergency land on water, but crashes and explodes into a fireball instantly. The Tiber River flows backwards, carrying a massive amount of seawater, attacking the center of Rome capital city. Sant'Angelo Bridge shakes violently as floodwaters slam against the ancient stone pillars with relentless and destructive force. Water spills over embankments, entering the Vatican, turning St. Peter's Square into a vast lake of floodwater. The Pope and clergy are evacuated by helicopter urgently amidst an unprecedented scene of chaos and widespread panic. The Colosseum, witness to history, is now submerged in mud up to the second level of its arches. The entire power grid of central Italy collapses, causing continuous chain explosions of electrical substations across the region. Vital highway routes are severed, bridges collapse, causing traffic to be completely paralyzed, and movement becomes impossible everywhere. A moving high-speed train is derailed by the water current, tipping over onto the side of the track. Thousands of cars float aimlessly on flooded streets, crashing into each other, forming piles of twisted scrap metal. Panicked people trample over each other to fight for high positions on the few remaining standing buildings. The crying of children and calls for help from the elderly echo everywhere, but no one answers them. Coastal hospitals are flooded. Generators fail, causing life support equipment to shut down completely in the dark wards. Disaster does not distinguish between rich and poor. Million-dollar villas and slums are leveled equally to the ground. Italy, one of Europe's largest economies, is now completely paralyzed before the overwhelming power of Mother Nature today. The tsunami does not stop there. It continues its journey of destruction, heading towards the western Mediterranean region. Fragments of Roman civilization drift far out to sea, becoming mere debris of the vast ocean currents. In Rome, the water level begins to stabilize, but the destruction is already complete and absolutely irreversible now. Survivors cling to hilltops, looking down at their beloved city with soulless eyes filled with shock and grief. No traffic noise, no music, only the wind whistling through broken window frames remains in the empty city. The geological structure of the Italian coast is changed forever. Many lands have disappeared permanently under the sea. Military forces are mobilized, but their vehicles cannot move in the vast sea of water covering the land. Chemical storage tanks rupture, leaking toxic substances, creating colorful slicks on the water, threatening the environment severely. A double disaster is forming. Floods, disease, and pollution threaten survivors with new, deadly dangers in the aftermath. The sun slowly sets behind dark clouds, leaving behind a terrifying and cold night for the survivors. Flashlights and campfires begin to flicker on high ground, the only signs of life in the darkness. But the horror is not over yet, as the tsunami is still traveling with unchanged speed and power. The next target of this monster is the Spanish coast, where people are still unaware of the danger. Night falls over the Mediterranean, but the water monster continues to travel tirelessly through the deep darkness. At the party paradise of Ibiza, loud music and neon lights still shine brightly across the entire coastline. No one hears the distant roaring sound approaching, drowned out completely by the heavy electronic music bass. Suddenly, a 30-meter-high wall of pitch-black water appears right behind the crowded nightclubs instantly. The wave crashes down, crushing the stage, sweeping thousands of dancing people out into the cold open sea. Super luxury yachts at the harbor are thrown onto land, lying scattered helplessly in the middle of streets. The Balearic Islands become the first line of defense to fall, completely flattened by the massive tsunami wave. The wave does not slow down, continuing straight towards the Spanish mainland with total destructive power and speed. Barcelona City wakes up as air raid sirens wail loudly throughout every corner and street of the city. But just like in Italy, reaction time is zero when nature attacks so suddenly and without mercy. The famous sail-shaped W Barcelona Hotel is the first victim, having all its glass windows shattered by waves. Seawater floods into Barcelona port, tossing thousands of cargo containers around, like empty matchboxes in the turbulent current. The beautiful La Rambla Boulevard turns into a deadly river, sweeping away every kiosk and tree instantly. Panicked crowds flee into the narrow alleys of the Gothic quarter, but the water has already blocked escape. The Sagrada Familia, the unfinished symbol, shakes violently as the ground beneath it liquefies due to the flood. A main bell tower snaps off, collapsing onto the surrounding residential area, creating a massive cloud of dust. The legendary Camp Nou Stadium turns into a giant swimming pool filled with mud and wrecked cars completely. The Barcelona subway system floods completely, trapping passengers inside dark train cars deep underground with no way out. In Valencia, the situation is even worse, as the tsunami combines with flash floods from the overflowing rivers. The modern city of arts and sciences is submerged by water, its glass buildings shattered and destroyed completely. Giant cranes at Valencia port collapse like dominoes, crushing the cargo ships docked underneath them with immense weight. An oil storage depot ruptures. Oil spills onto the water and catches fire, creating a floating sea of flames. The fire spreads fast into the city, with the current burning buildings not yet submerged by the water. The entire Iberian Peninsula power grid collapses, plunging Spain and Portugal into total darkness and chaos instantly. Power loss paralyzes communication systems. No one knows the fate of their loved ones in the chaos. Hospitals are packed with injured people, but lack electricity for surgery or to maintain vital medical equipment running. Survivors climb onto the rooftops of apartment buildings, huddling in the cold wind and pitch-black darkness together. They see spots of fire floating on the water, looking like lost souls wandering in a living hell. Chaos erupts as supermarkets are looted, people fighting each other for every single bottle of clean water. Police and military forces are completely overwhelmed. Social order collapses entirely within just a few hours. High-speed rail lines connecting Spain and France are destroyed by floods, isolating the country completely from neighbors. The rich agriculture of southern Spain is soaked in salt water, the fertile land dying gradually forever. 1/3 of the arable land is wiped out, signaling a massive food crisis for all of Europe. As dawn breaks, the Spanish landscape appears like a battlefield after the apocalypse, ruined and silent. Famous golden beaches are now covered with dead marine life and plastic waste from the deep ocean. People walk dazed on mud-filled streets, unable to believe their eyes at what little is left standing. Unique gaudy architectural works, the pride of humanity, have been ruined by nature's unstoppable force forever. The Spanish government declares a national state of emergency, calling for international aid from around the world immediately. But neighboring countries are also struggling to cope with the consequences of this massive climate disaster themselves. The entire Southern Europe region has been wiped out economically, culturally, and regarding infrastructure completely today. Millions of people lose their homes, creating the largest climate refugee stream in modern history moving north. Makeshift refugee camps spring up everywhere, severely lacking food, clean water, and medicine for the displaced people. Disease begins to break out from stagnant waters, threatening the lives of those who just survived the wave. The world is shocked to realize the fragility of civilization before the absolute power of nature today. What is lost is not just property, but an entire part of brilliant human history and culture. Humans will have to learn to be more humble, or they will face permanent extinction very soon. The tsunami has passed, but the scar it leaves will remain forever with time and human memory. This is the final warning for humanity. Protect the Earth before it is too late for us all.